Hello and welcome back to our second edition of the Boxing Social live show on Sunday in association with Betfred. With me, your host, Rob Tebbutt. Before we introduce our esteemed panel of guests, I'd just like to remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe for more Boxing Social content. So now that's out of the way, let's introduce our esteemed panel of guests. We've got Dan Matthews from the Daily Mail. We've got the most tanned man in boxing media, Declan Warrington from the Sunday Times, and we've got Ade Oladipo, who's got more jobs than all of us put together, so we won't waste our time in listing all of them. But now that's out of the way, Dec, we're going to come to you first. Tyson Fury, another masterful performance, emphatic win over Deontay Wilder last night.
Yeah, amazing.
Just ask
fight.
you to speak into your mic.
Sorry, amazing fight. Not just a masterful performance, ballsy, really ballsy from both fighters. I'm in awe of them both, really. Wilder for the punishment he took and was willing to take. Fury for the risk he had to take after getting hurt to take the fight away from Wilder again. Just what an amazing trilogy and what an amazing rivalry. After the second fight, you didn't think we'd get another fight like that last night, and those two have left their mark and will forever. They'll forever be associated for bringing us such a great rivalry. Yeah.
Ade, we sat in here a couple of weeks ago after Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk, another monumental performance from Alexander Usyk, but something very different about the fight last night in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it felt that, right? The whole build-up was different. It was dark. It was menacing, and it maybe had to be that to kind of lure us in, because I think after the second fight, you kind of felt like, why are we seeing this again? And I think Wilder almost sold it by going quiet and not saying anything, and then almost being rebuilt, right? Look at the size of him physically. That was rebuilt. And mentally as well. I think Malik Scott done a good job of just getting into his head thinking, look, you can win. You can beat Tyson Fury. And that kind of helped sell the fight, because I think a lot of people going into it was like, come on, Tyson Fury's going to win this one and win it comfortably again. I was never sure. And I done a couple of videos saying it, like, if you're picking Tyson Fury just like that, then you might need to kind of rewatch a bit of boxing again, because Wilder, literally that right hand, and I think we saw it a couple of times last night, at any time, even when he was out on his feet yesterday, like out on his feet in the ninth round, I was like, steady, because at any time he felt like it was going to detonate on Tyson Fury's jaw. But I thought the fight was incredible. Boxing does that. It grips you in. I'm a massive football fan. There's not much football games that grip me in like that. Boxing has a way of just gripping you in where you are watching it like that at any time, thinking anything can happen. And it was fantastic. Tyson Fury has just a will to win like no other. Like if he's not going to outbox you and be, skillful on the back foot, dancing around, he's just going to dirty box you, elbows, headbutts, low body shots, anything just to get the job done. And he's incredible. Obviously, clearly the best heavyweight of this generation. And I think he was asked the question about compare yourself to other eras, and the people are going to start doing it. But I thought his answer was fantastic. Like, I'm just the best boxer of this generation. And I guess that's what we can do. The rest we probably can leave for barbershop talk.
And finally, over to you, Dan. Was it good for you?
That was excellent for us. I mean, echo both what Dec and Ade said. I mean, it was an absolutely unbelievable fight. I think the thing that struck me was, we were talking before, after the third round, you thought it was over. After the fourth round, you thought it was over the other way. And then it just, and even as Ade said, I mean, even though Wilder, every minute in between rounds, he looked dead on his feet. He was fighting for barely 30 seconds of every round towards the end, but you still felt, he landed a short uppercut, he landed a right hand, and just had you gripped on the edge of your seat the whole fight, and you just never know with a fight like that. And that, I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I couldn't think of another heavyweight fight. When you think of the stage it was on as well, you see slugfests all the time, but this was two of the best heavyweights in the world on the biggest stage in the fight capital of the world, laying it all on the line. And I mean, the resolve both men showed, to get up. It was going to need a definitive finish like that, and that was, for everyone apart from Wilder, the cherry on the cake of that the trilogy needed and that the sport needed.
Yeah, it really did kind of close out the trilogy. But just going back to the start of the fight, obviously much has been made in the build-up. We've all heard of kind of changes to the camp, and Deontay Wilder's going to come in this and do that, and obviously we saw him come in heavy. Dec, early on in the first round, I think we probably saw Wilder jab to the body and throw more straight right hands to the body than we've ever seen for his entire career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he had to try something different, and that's, I guess, why, even if you expected the fight to be more like the second one, you thought there would be some drama because you knew Wilder had to go for it at some point. but as soon as Fury landed at the end of the first round, that went out the window, didn't it? I don't think the weight actually did him any favours, the changes he made, really. The biggest benefit he had from him is I think he allowed him to go into the fight with confidence that he could win, because if he's that same fighter as he was second time round, then how does he rebuild himself psychologically? Whereas he looks at himself, I put on this weight, right, I'm ready to fight Fury, I'm ready to fight a different fight. But yeah, I thought you saw him tire very quickly. We mentioned this before about the second fight. There's no poker face to Wilder whatsoever, and you could see as early as the second that he was starting to tire and get concerned. And I dare say though the extra weight did tire him out as well, I'd imagine that he burnt up a lot of nervous energy in the build-up to the fight early on in the rounds, because he was still aware he'd gone in with someone who not that long ago destroyed him.
Yeah, and I think obviously they've both been out of the ring for such a long time now. Fury had kind of got used to and got accustomed to fighting in Vegas, keeping more active certainly than he's been in the second half of his career. We didn't see that last night. And it kind of made for a better spectacle. It made for that kind of chaotic. Well, the first 4 or 5 rounds were absolutely electrifying. I couldn't believe after, I think it was the middle of the 5th round, it felt like we were in like the 11th round, the 12th round, the 13th round of the fight. It was unbelievable action.
Yeah, and you got to credit. Like I was watching it, I was thinking Fury's 20 stone. Yeah, he's looks like he's as fit as his fiddle in the 9th round. I was like, how is that possible? I mean, this guy is putting it on you. He's not like he's working every single minute of every round. You're thinking his fitness levels. No one really talks about Fury's fitness levels. It's always about his resolve and his will to win. His fitness levels are incredible for someone that doesn't look physically in great shape, but he clearly is. But I think you're right what you said about mentally, and I think Fury. Look, mentally going into the fight, Fury's thinking, I beat you on my worst day, a couple of years ago. I smashed you to pieces sort of 20 months ago. So in theory, all the pressure is on Wilder. Fury's going in there knowing I can beat you, whereas you don't really know you can beat me. Yes, you've got the big right hand, but I've hurt you so many times before, and you know that. And I think Wilder got hit. What was it, in the end of the second round, I think, or third?
He got hit with a 1-2 at the end of the first round.
Yeah, and I think then he realised, we're back here.
And he kind of reverted to type, didn't he? He went head hunting again. I don't think we ever saw the jab or the right hand to the body, which I thought was working quite well. He was obviously Wilder's biggest asset. Fury said it in the interview with Bunce for BT beforehand. Like, Wilder is the only person who can close that gap with knockout punching power. And admittedly, he wasn't throwing it to the head, but he was still closing the gap and he was still landing that right hand to the body. And you could see Fury visibly go, he's not faced that before.
In the rematch, you saw Fury at the start of every round almost literally sprint to the centre of the ring, take the centre ring and keep it, much like Klitschko did against Hay. Because Wilder was throwing that jab early onto the body, Fury had to think, couldn't take the centre of the ring, and it put him on the back foot a little. It made him adjust, made him think again, and it unsettled him. And Wilder did take the first round.
I think also one thing, I mean, you touched on the 1-2 at the end of the first round, and this will probably be lost in everything, but I felt like there were a couple of psychological turning points really early on in the fight when, Wilder had a good first round, but then at the end of the first round, Fury lands that 1-2, which, again, reminded him of where he'd been. And then in the second round, I think it was, Wilder landed a big right hand, which didn't catch him flush, but Fury came back with a big right hand of his own and landed. And you just felt like Wilder needed something to psychologically convince him, I can turn the tide. And every time it looked like he might be getting there, whether it was a good start or he landed a right hand, Fury had an answer. And I felt like, then given what happened after, I felt like those were so key psychologically, and just making sure he kept Wilder at arm's length in terms of, there wasn't any huge shifts in momentum until the 4th round. And then even then, Fury jumped, wasn't cowed, obviously saved by the bell, but came straight back out in the 5th and landed a huge right hand again. And as Deck said at the start, put himself in danger constantly. And that, speaks so much to his boxing ability, but also his kind of mental fortitude to be willing to put himself in the pocket in range. And given what Wilder's already landed on him.
It's
238
well,
pound wrecking ball.
It was a really intelligent way of fighting, because after the 4th round, Wilder's thinks he's got him out on his feet. Confident. Wilder's confident for the first time in probably over 10 rounds between the two of them. He knew he had to take the momentum away from Wilder, and the way to do that he wasn't trading as Hay did when Bellew knocked him down. He just fought on instinct and thought, I've got to get him out here. Fury went in there to take the fight away from him, to take his confidence, to stop him building the momentum he was building, and he had to take risks to do that. And like Dan said, be in range. That is incredibly ballsy for a fighter, and it showed a lot of intelligence, really backing your ability, so much confidence. because almost anyone else would have just taken the 5th off and tried to survive it and then go again from the 6th. Not Fury. He ended up the 5th round on top again.
Yeah, it was straight back
Such
in
a
the
turnaround.
straight back in the eye of the storm. Like going into that 3rd round as well, you mentioned kind of the right hand, the 1-2 at the end of the 1st round, then the 2nd round when kind of Fury rode one of the right hands and then like came through the 2nd round, and then in that 3rd round when he knocked him down, you kind of thought, okay, well this is it now. Like
Yeah.
Fury's now on top. You could see Wilder already tiring as early as the 3rd round, and then the 4th round happened. Fury walks into that absolute hand cannon, 238 pound Alabama slammer.
Everything on it, didn't it?
And like Fury, it hit Fury high on the
Yeah,
head, and he
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
did that dance, didn't he? He went down in stages. This wasn't like the knockdown at the end of the first fight
No.
where he kind of he just got wiped out. Really, you could tell he, and it's often the ones on the top of the head or the side of the head that do the damage, which we actually saw later on with Fury knocking Wilder out. But I thought the fight was done, and I think it's fair to say if that 4th round would have gone an extra 30 seconds, it could well have been done.
Yeah.
That both of those knockdowns were heavy knockdowns.
It must be so. Wilder will wake up thinking, "I've done that to everyone, everyone, and that's it. Fight's over." Right? Ortiz down the middle, Dominic Brazil, Stavern, and that's it. Once I get him in that situation, it's it. He must just think, and that's probably why he has all these weird accusations with Tyson Fury. It must be. He must think this is not possible. Like I've hit you with what was the cleanest right hand, like literally 200, like you say, 238 pounds of everything. You're walking into it, I'm going into it. And you're probably thinking, this is just madness. And that's probably why after the fight as well, where Tyson Fury tries to go up to him, and which I think was sort of bad sportsmanship, but then if you've just been knocked out, your head's not really there, is it? He's probably thinking, no, you're still cheating somehow. Like I've done everything I can to beat you. There's still something wrong. So look, I think Wilder will wake up, and I think the boxing world eventually will give Wilder credit, because in this era, I still think Wilder would have iced AJ. In this era, the only man that I think could beat Wilder is Tyson Fury. I really do. And I even, maybe to an extent, put Usyk in that, because I think if Usyk gets caught, he's out as well. And I think he'll gain sort of confidence that he lost to what is the best heavyweight of this generation.
He's knocked him out he knocked him down, 4 times.
What else can he do?
And certainly 3 of those, or certainly 2 of them. So the first knockdown in the 4th round last night, and then the final knockdown in the first fight. They're fight-ending
You're
shots.
done, yeah.
The
The
first
first-
mistake that would have contributed to the fatigue he felt thereafter
Yeah,
as well,
yeah.
because that would have just rocked him.
Well, you saw later on in the fight, like in this round 7 and 8, you could see Fury walking him down and taking clean right hands.
Yeah.
Never seen somebody take a clean right hand from Wilder and kind of shrug it off and walk forward. I mean, he still was getting hurt. Like Wilder was literally dangerous until the last right hand
Was it
landed
the
in the
7th or
fight.
8th round? Like the last 15 seconds?
Yeah, he
of one
landed
of
like a
those.
right uppercut on the
Yes.
inside.
I was like, oh, what's going on here? And Fury kind of like, oh, we need to end this round quickly.
The snap was gone from some of those punches over
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
because he was tired. He was losing his balance. He was standing.
But he kind of developed like the more heavy-handed power that we don't really associate with Wilder. We associate that kind of lights out, closing the
Yeah.
distance, that streaky power. But like what we saw with him kind of late in the fights was him having like heavy hands, being a heavier guy, and when he was landing these big clubbing shots. I didn't think that just to kind of deviate a little bit with regards to the weight that he put on, I do feel that he lost some of that explosiveness, some of that speed. And obviously we saw what happened with the stamina, but I always felt that it was very important for Wilder to retain that speed, the hand speed and the foot speed. And I think that went from him with being 238 pounds.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it's all well and good gaining that weight. And again, I think the biggest benefit for him was psychological, but he's still nowhere near as big as Fury. So what's the point in trying to... You're undermining some of your biggest strengths. You may as well have just come in lighter, particularly given, I mean, this is a benefit of hindsight, but Fury was heavier as well. So that speed advantage could have counted even more if you are that much lighter. And those shots he landed in the 4th round maybe might have landed them a bit quicker, hurt Fury a little bit more. But then
Even with
again,
that, it's
saying
15
that,
seconds away.
Yeah.
If that 4th round goes on another 15 seconds, honestly, when Fury went down the 2nd time, I was like,
Yeah,
this
I
fight's
thought it was done. Yeah.
So he's 15 seconds away from becoming the WBC heavyweight champion. You could say the same thing about Tyson Fury maybe in the 3rd round, but I don't know with the weight. I think lighter or heavier, I think just Tyson Fury's just got his number.
the weight did help him take a lot of the punishment.
Yeah, that's the other thing
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Because he took a lot of punishment last night, and Fury's punching power has improved a lot in the past couple of fights, and he stayed on his feet. And I know the ropes kept him up sometimes, but I'm not sure the lighter Wilder would have been able to do that.
No,
It didn't help him after. It felt like after the 4th round, Fury properly kind of turned on the nous and started to lean on him a lot more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I don't really
Beating him on the
feel
inside
like,
as well.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the extra weight really helped Wilder in that. He didn't really seem to have any kind of plan to do. He must have known that was coming. He'd done it all in the second fight. I thought there were times where he kind of dropped to one knee, and I thought maybe he was doing almost Klitschko. Just take it away from him. But he only did it a couple of times, and he'd put on extra bulk, but he wasn't doing anything on the inside. He was just letting Fury dictate, and that felt like a real turning point when Fury switched up. I don't know if it was a necessity because he was still feeling, groggy from the fourth round, or whether it was a ploy, right, let's just lean all over him now. But it completely, after that fourth round, any kind of momentum Wilder had built up, it just, literally sapped him as his energy was getting sapped by Fury just leaning on him.
Yeah.
As Dec said, I think, sorry, as you said though, Dec, I think the extra weight was just his own confidence. Whether or not it was going to play any part in the fight, I think he
looked massive.
Yeah, he walked in the ring thinking, and even when he was walking to the ring, he almost looked like Klitschko-esque when Klitschko used to come with those big shoulder pads. It looked like that, and I think it was a case of, okay, we'll see. And whether or not it played any part, and probably didn't, you guys are right, but I think he needed it to kind of show, okay, we're not letting this man bully us again. Because he got bullied in both fights, and I think he's probably thinking, that ain't happening again. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I can bench this and squat that. Obviously, it doesn't play any part in boxing, but I think he needed it just to give him that extra bit of confidence going into the ring.
One thing we haven't said, by the way, we've been talking about how Fury essentially did get saved by the bell. Regardless of that, the powers of recovery showed remarkable. Even to have a minute,
don't make sense.
He did that at the end of the first fight, and that's just become this iconic moment. But if anything, his recovery last night was even more impressive.
How did he not have Undertaker walk him to the ring? It just seemed like a given that. It's just a free hit.
Seemed to have a clear head from the start of the fifth round, and
so you kind of need from Wilder's perspective. He would have been told, he'd gone back to the corner at the end of the fourth round thinking, I've got him. And then all of a sudden Fury's up on his toes again. He's slipping and sliding. He's coming forward. That must, again, just those, like you were talking about earlier, Dan, those little psychological breaks that are just so important in a fight. Just killing that momentum is so important.
And also, how many rounds did they fight together? 30 rounds. That was probably the one time in 30 rounds that Fury kind of lumbered into range, didn't throw, didn't feint, and he actually walked onto a right hand. So that was, it was the perfect moment for Wilder. He landed flush. You know that, having your gloves up isn't any kind of defense if Wilder's in range. And yet, Fury was up, and that must have been, although, he would have gone back to at the end of the fourth round thinking, I've got him. He must think, what more?
And he must think.
It was the one time. It was
the whole corner must think he's going to slow down. Surely, you're thinking, okay, look, Tyson Fury, second half of the fight, he's nearly 20 stone. He's heavy as well. He's going to slow down. He just doesn't slow down, honestly. And
it's just so relaxed.
It's so that's
so
what
relaxed.
Yeah. Well, I've said already. I thought Wilder must have been burning up a lot of nervous energy. I think that's one of the reasons Fury was able to fight like he could during the first fight, despite having, let's face it, really bad preparations for a fight that size, because he's so relaxed, he's so at home in the boxing ring that he doesn't expend any unnecessary energy. He just expends the energy he uses to fight because he's a step ahead mentally always. That's one of the things that makes him so special.
Fight go on too long, in your opinion? Obviously, we saw all of the fallout from the second fight. It's of no surprise to me that the fight, in my opinion, did go on for a couple of rounds too long. We didn't see
Malik Scott was never going to stop.
We were never going to see the towel come in, and we were never going to see the referee kind of stop him in between rounds. Or I know the doctor came in a few times, but that was never realistically going to happen.
He always had a good 15 seconds. I remember at end of round 8 or 9. Sorry, I've still not slept. But I remember round 8 or 9. He had a good last 20 seconds. I was thinking that's just enough for him to not be pulled from the fight. He kept on doing those little bursts at the end of the rounds, and I thought that was enough. But look, I thought the fight could have been stopped from round 7. Honestly, I thought round 7, Tyson Fury put on him to the point where I was thinking, okay, this is a beating now. And if the ropes, as you said earlier, if the ropes were a bit tighter, he could slump. He could easily get slept. But I think it should have been stopped. I think that's 2 beatings now he's taken back to back. And I kind of do wonder what next for Wilder because of those beatings. And not just physically, but mentally for Wilder as well. This guy was a guy that was icing people, confident, the bronze bomber, the most dangerous man in boxing. Now he's been beaten up twice by a person that he thought cheated. And I think that mentally is going to be very difficult to come back from.
I actually gave Fury a 10-8 round in the 7th because I thought he was that dominant. I thought it was just the ropes keeping him up, and the ref could have jumped in, his corner could have jumped in. But saying that, even with all the punishment he took thereafter, the only time I really thought perhaps that did go on too long was when he finally got stopped. Because when he finally got stopped, he looked like he was in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he did survive pretty well. But actually, on reflection, I don't think it did go on too long. And that enhanced his reputation, his ability to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
You could put Wilder back into another high-profile fight with pretty much any other heavyweight now, possibly even Fury, even though that's not going to happen, and it would sell because of the performance Wilder put on, because of his bravery. You can criticise all his technical flaws all you want, but that is a man with a lot of heart. He showed that a lot during the second fight as well. But there's no quitting Wilder whatsoever.
And I suppose you can't almost have it both ways. You can't say he was dangerous until the final. Until the final punch,
and then he shouldn't have been stopped. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I agree with you. There were points, definitely before the 11th round where you thought this is unnecessary. But then he would throw one shot that made you think, oh, actually,
hello, he's still here.
I also think he often looks worse. Perhaps he actually.
It's like Dec was saying earlier. He's just got a terrible poker face. When he's tired, he's like
clearly balance isn't one of his strong points anyway. So he's got thin legs, and he's always
particularly the extra beef as well. Last night he looked even more.
By the way, he's a reflection of the career he's had up to fighting Fury, because he's had it almost entirely his own way the whole way from. So he hasn't
everything
had to
he's
learn
hit is just
anything
gone.
like that. Yeah,
it's just turned into dust.
And do you know what? I mean, the thing is, I think it needed that punch, the one Fury landed to end the fight, to actually put the seal on the rivalry. Because without that, say he goes a distance,
you go again.
You don't necessarily go again, but it's not the absolute conclusive finish to what has been an amazing rivalry that we now do have.
Yeah, he'll say, well, I put him down 4 times. If I put, maybe the 5th time.
The next time he's not going to get up.
Yeah, and he said, didn't he? He said, Fury never stopped me in the last fight. He didn't knock me out. So he needed to be knocked out.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it's difficult to process it, because obviously you don't want to, like Deontay Wilder, for all of, the stick that he's got after the second fight in particular, he's been a hugely exciting fighter. He's given the sport an awful lot. And as you've mentioned, he is a hard man. Those Ortiz fights, the second Fury fight, he was stopped on his feet, rightfully stopped, in my opinion, on his feet. And last night, all of I think every judge gave him every round from the 6 onwards, apart from Tim Cheatham, I think gave Wilder the 9th round, which I couldn't see. But the second half of the fight was so one-sided that if there was any quitting him, if you'd have quit in between rounds or withdrew in between rounds, you would have kind of looked at it and gone, yeah, absolutely rightfully so. Or if the towel would have come in, or if the ref would have stopped him. But for Wilder, I think it was more important for him to get that closure, particularly after the way that the second fight ended.
Yeah, and actually, Ade's saying you're not sure how he mentally recovers from that, but it was kind of lost on the TV coverage. They didn't mention it, but when he was walking back through the crowd, he was kind of, putting his hand up to the crowd, high-fiving people, pumping his chest. And you felt like, for once, he'd actually kind of he'd accepted that he was part of an amazing fight and he'd lost. And actually, although, having the fuel of injustice or feeling like, I can beat him again, maybe helps and motivation and stuff. But actually, I think sometimes for a fighter, it's really important and quite beneficial to be able to almost like compartmentalize a loss and say, I lost to the better man. I was part of an amazing fight. Because now I feel like he can move on and he can, go into other fights, still unbelievably dangerous. But I feel like for him, the chapter's closed now to some extent. Whereas you didn't feel like after the second fight, he could lie to himself. He could tell himself, I could have done this, or, this went against me, Fury cheated, whatever. You felt like when you saw him walking out, there was almost an acceptance that he felt almost like privileged to be part of that. He lost, but I felt like that was quite important for him mentally. I feel like he's probably been able to close that chapter now in the same way we are, which bodes well for, potentially future fights. I mean, there should be tons of fights.
Interesting, because obviously, like you say, he walked out after getting stopped and beaten, and you're right, I'm with you actually. Mentally, he's probably recovered from it. Whereas AJ lost on points, and you feel like he's really mentally in a bad place. Whereas one's been beaten up and stopped and beat down, and the other one's been a bit embarrassed. But you feel like Wilder's more equipped mentally to come back from that than AJ is to come back from the Usyk defeat.
I think the result last night was just a lot more conclusive, and with everything that everything they've gone through the whole trilogy, that was we did the reaction a couple of weeks ago after Joshua-Usyk, and there are little things that Joshua can cling on to after that. He can say, well, I boxed the wrong fight, or the eye went, or I should have tried to impose myself more on Usyk. Whereas there's not really anything, in my opinion, that Wilder can really say, well, this went wrong, that went wrong. He'd give up a tremendous performance. He almost had Fury, but that was a conclusive ending. He can't blame the towel coming in, the ref, the this, the that. He had his moments throughout the fight, right up until those rounds where he was getting dominated in the second half of the fight. But I think the last night's performance is a lot more conclusive. And you would just hope now, because, we've all met Wilder on occasions, and, I've found him always to be a very charming, engaging guy, family man, and, a really funny, kind of affable character. And you would just kind of hope now that the bitterness that's kind of engulfed, not necessarily just Wilder, but the whole Wilder-Fury kind of battle and rivalry is put to bed, and we can look at what a brilliant trilogy it was. Because with respect to Joshua and what Joshua has achieved, Fury Wilder is the rivalry of this era of heavyweight boxing now.
Which is a great era as well.
Yeah, it is the rivalry now. And they should both be immensely proud of what they've done. Tyson Fury is the #1 heavyweight in the world. And Deontay Wilder almost had him twice.
No shame.
Yeah, there really should be no shame. And people should respect Deontay Wilder. Hopefully he does come out and, give credit to Tyson. I know they had their kind of to-do in the corner. You'd chalk that up to hopefully it, being very raw at the time. And after the fight, obviously, he's just been knocked out. But you would hope now that they can kind of look at it for what they want. But having said that, moving on for Deontay Wilder, what next for him?
Yeah, good question. My best guess is that he waits for the loser of Joshua-Usyk, which I strongly suspect will be Joshua, because I think that's a fight that will appeal to Joshua as much as it will Wilder, because that's a big, worthwhile fight, the sort of fight that you can market and build and present as a worthwhile fight. If Joshua loses to Usyk twice, there will be a lot of people ready to give up on him. Insofar as what is he still fighting for? He's not going to get any of the world title fights, world championships back. So where's this journey going? Whereas as soon as if he was in a fight with Wilder, and you're like, well, this is a really interesting shootout, which this is in the traditions of heavyweight boxing, probably the best matchup in the heavyweight division in terms of it being these two really athletic fighters who will just have a shootout, who your heart will be in your mouth from the opening bell in theory. So that would be the fight. I think you could sell it. Let's find out who is the best of these two, as opposed to it just being two losers trying to rebuild their career. It's actually just fight itself. It's a great fight.
I feel like as well, if Joshua has designs on fighting Fury eventually for the Undisputed title, he almost needs like a semi-final win, I think, now. Yeah. If we're working on the assumption that he loses the rematch, then I feel like even if it's not for him, but for the country at large and the boxing public at large, I think now there's a real sense of Fury was, Fury would walk through him. It's not really the contest that many people thought. I think if he were to beat Wilder and have that confidence and that as a leg up to a fight with Fury, that suddenly changes the narrative to an extent. I don't think it will change many people's opinions that Fury would be the favourite, but I think it would give him a lot more capital in the fight and make it a lot more intriguing, because I feel like if he doesn't have a statement win like that, clearly people would want to see Joshua Fury, but I feel like the clamour would be significantly reduced unless he wins as a signature win before that. Wilder is the perfect.
There is probably one other fight they could make for Joshua, which would really sell Tyson Fury, which would be to put him in with Hughie Fury, and then they could, if he beats Hughie Fury,
Joshua
then
versus Hughie Fury. That's not a fight that I've ever thought of.
No, but the thing is, promotionally, that's not that difficult to make. And if Joshua beats Hughie Fury, then you present it as a revenge trip for Tyson, and that does sell that as well. Actually,
the problem for AJ with the Wilder fight, and look how much stick he still gets for the Klitschko performance from some people. Oh, you beat Klitschko, he's coming off a loss and he hasn't fought. If he were to fight a Wilder next, if he were to lose to Usyk, it will be the same story being told. Oh, you've beaten Wilder, but he lost twice to Fury and got stopped and hasn't won a fight in 3 years. I think for Wilder, it depends if they're trying to do a rebuild job or go strate back in there. I think we saw
he's 36 now, isn't he? Is he?
But he's 36,
35,
but 35. But he looks. And I'm about to say he's not taking much damage. He has taken a lot of damage recently. But we saw Helenius last night. They're trying to get him straight back in there with someone. Charles Martin's always floating around.
Yep.
I mean, there are fights out there.
And heavyweights always have another life as well.
Yeah, you can always repackage and recycle them. But I think if you're... I think if they're going to go kind of a rebuild job, I think the Andy Ruiz fight is still a big seller in
Yeah,
America.
it's a massive seller.
Mexican first ever Mexican heavyweight
African.
champion. Yeah, exactly. And
Massive.
Deontay Wilder, that's still a big fight. You would want to see probably Wilder get a little bit of a knockover job, not like in between. Then get the confidence back up, let him go out and starfish a Charles Martin or somebody like that in 2 or 3 rounds. Get that confidence up, a nice highlight reel knockout. Wilder's back, blah blah blah. Another win for Ruiz. Obviously, he had that kind of up and down performance against Chris Arreola where he was dropped. So maybe a win for Ruiz, and that could be that's a pay-per-view fight in house with PBC. And then we'll see from there. I personally don't think Joshua Wilder will ever see that. I think we've missed the window for that. I think there still lies too many promotional and political obstacles to make that fight now, and you don't have the same. It's still a big fight, obviously, and I don't think necessarily Wilder's commercial appeal would have been dimmed really at all after last night because of how brilliant a performance it was and how well he carried himself. But it's not as big of a fight as it could have been before.
Be more willing now because they don't
hold all the aces anymore.
Yeah, no one holds that card anymore.
That's a good
There
point.
is no belts. There's nothing, and both of them are desperate, knowing that a win for either puts them straight back up to that number 2 or number 3 spot. So I think it's easier that way. But look, you know how we are. We like to write people off in boxing. I think Wilder, again, 35, looks in great shape, takes care of himself, doesn't drink, looked really good in spots yesterday. I think there's still a good few fights left for Deontay Wilder if he wants there to be.
But you touched on an interesting thing here about Wilder in the future. What does he do? Does he carry on coming in as heavy as this, or does he try and get lighter again? And if he tries to get lighter again, I think the lighter Wilder is better. Is he going to be the same fighter? Because an aging fighter, when they strip muscle off, it often depletes them.
And he's had a long time in the gym to work and build himself up because he looked massive. Coming in, he was like bursting out of his clothes. He was huge. So you make a good point about that. And as we mentioned earlier about the punch resistance anyway, being heavier and taking shots as a heavier fighter, stripping away that weight will make you lose the punch resistance, but what it might give you slightly more offensively, make him a more dangerous fighter.
But you mentioned Ruiz, for example. Ruiz has got underrated hand speed.
Yeah.
And maybe you'd need that additional speed to beat someone like Ruiz. Maybe that's the sort of thing that will undermine him in that sort of matchup.
What about Tyson Fury? Obviously, we've got Dillian Whyte versus Otto Wallin, end of the month, October 30th.
Yeah.
Eddie,
live on the zone.
Live on the zone. Ade getting the plug in for the company man over there, Ade. But we interviewed Eddie the other day, and Eddie said it's quite strange because we had the Mauricio Sullivan WBC kind of announcement, and Eddie said, well, there are actually a few things in there that we're not happy with, and obviously there's various rematch clauses floating around, which always confuse the situation for everybody. So Eddie was kind of hinting, go check out Unboxing Social, the interview, so I can plug as well. Eddie kind of hinted at that maybe not being completely resolved yet, but you would think, at least from what we've heard from the WBC and Matchroom, that the winner of Whyte Wallin will now face Tyson Fury next. So are we all in agreement that's probably the most likely fight for Fury?
I think, unless he wants to take another, or he wants to take another Tom Schwartz job and just keep plugging away, keep ticking over until Usyk or Joshua is available. But if he has to, I think the Whyte fight is perfect for Fury in some ways, because we'd all fancy him to win, and then Whyte, he's not necessarily Wilder or Joshua, but he's a big name over here. It's another win. It's another statement, because I think he could handle Whyte quite comfortably, and
agreed.
And then he's moving on to an even bigger fight, and he's just chalking up legacy wins potentially from now on, and that's. It depends, I guess, how many risks he wants to take, and how many wins he wants to chalk up.
I actually think Fury would view either a rematch with Wallin or the Whyte fight as similar to Tom Schwartz. I think
like a tune-up fight,
bigger than better than.
Take a tune-up fight against Dillian Whyte at Old Trafford.
In
front of 70.
I mean, Frank Warren was asked last night at the end of the fight, wasn't he? Are we going to see him fight in a British stadium sometime soon? So Dillian Whyte would be perfect for that. But actually, the Wallin fight was dramatic enough that if that was a rematch, I don't think many people would be disappointed, particularly after how.
White,
it would be ordered.
How exciting it was last night. Everyone will consider every Fury fight worthwhile watching hereafter.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to see. I'm not sure whether or not maybe one of you can lie to me. Does Fury have one more fight on his ESPN deal, or is he now done?
Good question.
Because if he has one fight left on his ESPN deal, I could maybe not see him fighting in the UK for that last fight. But I don't know whether or not that's over and done with. Obviously, if he's still with ESPN, they're going to want him to box at 10 o'clock over there, 5:30 again in the morning for us, and prime time American slot. They're not necessarily going to want him boxing in Manchester.
And that's a typical promotional tool anyway, isn't it? Oh, we're going to have this big fight in Britain, because that just keeps British fans that little bit more interested. Not dissimilarly to Anthony Joshua every now and again when he talks about fighting in Nigeria. That's just keeps the fan base happy. Just keeps you popular.
Yeah, and if the fight is there to be made in America and it makes more business sense for the promoter, the fighter, management and what have you, that's where the fight will go.
I believe I read some quotes from Bob Arum earlier this week saying Fury Whyte would be perfect for Vegas. I'm not sure I agree that is a typical Vegas fight, but if Bob Arum believes that, that suggests he's quite confident that that fight will take place. If it is next, will take place in Vegas.
You almost wanted to see, when Dillian Whyte was kind of in this little quandary after the Povetkin rematch of who's he going to fight, where's he going to fight, you kind of felt like him boxing in America would have been a good idea.
Eddie kept talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. For a long time.
July, August, there was a lot of talk about him trying. There was even talk about him.
Why not fight Otto Wallin over there? Otto Wallin's like headline show PBC cards against Dominic Breazeale. Obviously, he's boxed Fury on ESPN, so he's got a profile there.
I don't think either of them particularly sell over there.
Yeah, I suppose. And obviously,
but
with a view to making the Fury fight bigger in America. But maybe they don't want. Maybe they think or they know that it's not going to be there anyway.
Should you say? But the first Fury fight after the first Wilder fight, which again was another amazing fight, was against Schwartz, and it didn't make much of an impression over there. And that's when we were building up to a Wilder rematch that was possibly the most essential fight in boxing at that time.
And I think for DAZN, it's big as well for them to have what would kind of be a pay-per-view event, wouldn't it? If it was on Sky, unfortunately, Dillian Whyte versus Otto Wallin would be big. And I think DAZN desperately need a big fight like that over here, UK time. And I think that must have been key behind the scenes as well in determining whether or not he fights over here. That they need a big name to fight desperately. Obviously, AJ was global rights. They've not had a big one, and I think this is for them a big one.
And also, it's a close fight. It's difficult to pick a winner potentially. So Whyte needs home advantage, and if you're in the Whyte camp, which obviously Matrimar, you want Whyte to have those advantages, which he may need.
We spoke to Eddie, and we kind of said to him like, Ryan, shout out Ryan Elliott, Boxing Social, asked Eddie like, would you maybe like pull out of that fight now? Like you could pull out of that fight, sit that fight out, and then you become you're mandatory. You get to fight him. Why roll the dice again? And he
but that's very Dillian Whyte, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, like you'd think
that's one of the reasons he's carved a career for himself.
Yeah, and that's why he's kind of made a career out of being kind of an exciting fighter who takes these risks and these opportunities. But also, we had the Povetkin situation, the first Povetkin fight. You'd think that potentially you'd just go, I tell you what, Otto Wallin's we still don't really know, I don't think, how good Otto Wallin is. He lost to Fury, but obviously gave him some problems in some rounds. He beat Dominic Breazeale, but let's be honest, Dominic Breazeale is a top 15, maybe fringe guy at best.
Keep going.
There we go. So, we don't really know how good Wallin is. So you think maybe kind of risk reward, having had your fingers burnt once, and look, the WBC situation has dragged on for years and years and years. If the opportunity is there to sit this one out and be a mandatory, maybe take that.
That's not Whyte though, is it?
No.
Whyte will back himself, and I think Whyte will make himself a strong favourite against Wallin. I think there's a part of Whyte that even if he considered himself the underdog, no matter how unlikely it is, that he would think let's bring it on.
Yeah.
I'll do something. He's a real fighter, Whyte.
And also, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't believe the WBC for 1 second, given this narrative he's crafted for himself.
Yeah.
He's been wronged for X number of years. Maurizio Suleiman telling him he's got 30 days to, or he's the mandatory. I would be very surprised.
It's very difficult for me to picture Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte happening. Like I can't even imagine it happening. I'm still a bit like something's going to happen, and either a belt gets vacated or something. I wouldn't be shocked if it's the Otto Wallin upset here, and that's that, and we don't see it because of that. But I still can't see how Tyson Fury fights Dillian Whyte.
Interesting. Wasn't it part of Fury's like five fight in 18-month plan that he put out? It's like, I'll fight Deontay Wilder, then I'll fight Dillian Whyte in December.
See, it's weird because he chats a lot of crap sometimes, but then he produces what he does in the early hours of this morning. Think, you can chat the crap.
I tell you what, he's some fighter. He is some fight. This is only myself and Ade.
What's this? His first defense.
First defense of his title, but like belts kind of come and go. You remember the victories, don't you? The performances, and in years to come, we're going to remember the 2 demolition jobs on Deontay Wilder. Admittedly, the last fight was a lot more topsy turvy than the second fight. That really was a one-way traffic. But as we said beforehand, me and you haven't slept. I've only come to work twice after not sleeping after fights, and the first one was Wilder Fury 1. In LA after he got up because I was just a buzz in LA, and then today as well, just couldn't like the fight was sensational. Tyson Fury, for me, he has now solidified himself as the heavyweight of the era. He has to go and beat Alexander Usyk to become undisputed champion, but he's won those belts before when he went over and beat Vladimir Klitschko, and we kind of had the roundtable discussion where it was like, what he's done in the last couple of years with those Wilder fights kind of reactivates that Klitschko win, where we'd kind of not brushed it off, but like being away from the ring, it was like, well, let's see what he does. That Klitschko win was the win was 3 years ago. He's got to do this, he's got to do that. Kind of reactivates it now. For me, I would like to see Tyson Fury come over and box in the UK because I think he deserves now that big stadium homecoming. Look, Anthony Joshua has been a fantastic ambassador for British boxing. What Anthony Joshua has done for British boxing in selling out stadiums in London, in Cardiff, everywhere, like New York City, obviously as an ambassador for British boxing over there, has been fantastic, unrivaled. But let's not forget about Tyson Fury and what he's done.
A stadium?
I think he can now. Like, he's now a global star. You saw Drake and
with the right opponent.
We saw Drake and Lil Wayne and all of like Zlatan and everybody giving him like the pre-fight messages and stuff, and Ainsley Harriott as well.
But it takes a lot of casual fans. Like when I was at the AJ Usyk fight, you're just walking around and you're seeing people that are not interested in boxing, but they're just there because it's almost it's like WrestleMania for them.
For me, Fury's on that level now. Like,
is he,
he's now like, he's cracked America. Once you crack America, that is, that's what every fighter wants to do. That's what every promoter wants to do. They want to go out there and crack America. Tyson Fury, in the first, second, and third fight, and he had those couple of fights in between where he came out in the Tom Schwartz. In the Tom Schwartz shorts, the Apollo Creed shorts before the Tom Schwartz fight. He was all over ESPN. He was singing in the ring afterwards. He's now done enough where, Tyson Fury, for me, should be coming back. He should be meeting the Queen. He should be this massive character now.
That's not Fury, is it?
That's not
Fury.
I don't know. Why isn't it Fury?
Turn it down.
I don't necessarily think he would. I think he now deserves to come home and be treated with the same reverence as a Lennox Lewis and fighters like that. He should come back to this country as a hero now.
The narrative for him, I think, has changed because after the whole Klitschko thing and then with the whole sports personality thing, there was a sense of, kind of FU to the British public. He never felt like he got the recognition he deserved. And he almost felt like that's kind of why he had no qualms about going to America. And you ask, like, will he fill a stadium? Well, the problem he's got is that everyone sees the clips on Twitter, and obviously hardcore boxing fans will have got up in the middle of the night, but I almost feel like he needs a fight here to solidify that, because a lot of the casual fans who turn up to AJ fights, we don't know if they'd turn up to a Fury fight because he hasn't fought. He hasn't fought over here at prime time UK time. Like, people will be waking up going, "Oh, he won again, amazing," and like they might watch the highlights. But it's quite hard to gauge actually how many people would turn out for a Fury fight, because when was the last time?
When was the last time he headlined an event in the?
I'm not sure Fury really is that bothered about that. I mean, look at the sort of money he's made. He's got, if he never fought again, he's got an incredible legacy as well, and I think that would be enough for Fury. I don't think he is desperate to sell out a stadium in the UK. I
don't know. I think he's not done it, so I think he'd probably want to do that. There has been this long-standing rivalry, and there has been kind of AJ for a large portion of his career has been the babyface champion. Similar to what?
No wrong.
Yeah, it'd be similar to like the All-American boy when you had like Sugar Ray Leonard. The guys like he's like he's like the London 2012 Olympic super heavyweight gold medalist. He was, he's kind of had that throughout his career, and he's done fantastically well, and he deserves it. It's not saying that Anthony Joshua doesn't deserve that, but for me, I want to see Tyson Fury get his flowers now. Tyson Fury, with the win over Vladimir Klitschko, with the 2.5 wins over Deontay Wilder in the trilogy there, I want to see him come back now, and let's see if he can do a stadium.
Dillian Whyte is the perfect opponent then for the
because they'll sell that together. Dillian Whyte's headlined however many pay-per-views on a Saturday night.
Perfect opponent for the summer, the UK, like you say, Old Trafford, wherever. That will do it. That's the homecoming fight, and that's what he needs. And although you say he doesn't care about it. I do think there is a part of him that wants that big homecoming.
Yeah, because it was like that. And when everything happened with kind of the sports personality of the year, like years ago, and after the Klitschko fight, you know, we've heard him say numerous times throughout his story that really did hurt him, that really did affect him, and like he didn't feel like he got that love. And yes, I'm sure he doesn't mind when he's picking up his multi-million-dollar paychecks and he's boxing on ESPN and he's all over the place in America, sure, but to get that love and get that respect. And he has been, you know, he's been a great ambassador for British boxing in the last few years, especially. I'll fight any man born from his mother, wherever, this, you know, in your back garden, anywhere like that. And yeah, exactly. And he's done it and he's delivered. Last night, I've had no sleep, so I'm a bit emotional and full of all of it. But Tyson Fury last night, what he did in the second fight, he is just a one-off, and he deserves to have his moment now and come back and do a big stadium.
Where is
Didn't he start getting that love after the first Wilder fight when he made that recovery? When he went
into
that fight with a terrible preparation.
Do you remember when we did the podcast? Sorry to interrupt you. When we did the podcast after we went to BT Studios and everyone was like, we thought they were announcing Wilder Fury 2. And Fury turned up and there was no Wilder and we went, oh no. And then he signed for ESPN and he basically went, right, see you guys. Yeah. And then we were like, well, when are these fights ever going to happen? It was crazy. Like
he started to get the love after that first fight, I think, as much as anything, because of the amazing ambassador he is for mental health. And I think that's transcended boxing, and I think that's achieved more than any big fight in the UK would ever do.
But he calls himself the people's champion, which implies he does want that.
Yeah.
He does see himself and he does want that kind of acclaim. And yeah, his performances deserve it over the last few years. I don't know, he's difficult to read, isn't he, in terms
because he'll say it 1 minute and then completely different the next.
So
but
it's difficult. I mean, I think if he retired and he didn't get that stadium fight, I don't think it would bother him as much as maybe some other UK fighters. But I think if he offered the right opponent and there was the right opportunity and the right money, I don't see why he'd turn it down or why he wouldn't want it.
If he never fought again, there wouldn't be a conversation in 10 years' time about him not having fought in a stadium. In 10 years' time, there'll be a conversation about whether he's actually our best ever heavyweight and better than Lennox Lewis, actually. I think that's the impression he's already made. And selling out a stadium, it's great. And it would be an amazing occasion if he did fight here, but I don't think it makes or breaks anything in Fury's career.
It's kind of like the
reputation.
The opportunity. Yeah, I agree with you. In 10 years' time, we're not going to go, well, did he do Wembley or did he do the Millennium Stadium? No, sure. But just for him to kind of come back and kind of do it, not do it right, but something similar to that. After what we saw after the only Vladimir Klitschko fight, despite numerous attempts at a rematch, after that Vladimir Klitschko fight, and it did go tits up for everybody, didn't it? We should have kind of had this new heavyweight that we were celebrating, and it should have been a much better fit, and we should have had the two, AJ and Fury, as these big, massive stars over here. For whatever reason, it didn't work out, and it's now history. Now we've kind of got this opportunity where he's done it again, and he's gone out and he's floating the flag for British boxing, and it would be great, I think, just to have him back over here. The ideal fight, the obvious fight, would have been him to do him and Joshua over here in Wembley. That would have been, and that still could be the fight.
Ideal.
Yeah.
I still think it's just my greed and just what, as a Brit, wanting to see a Brit over here in a massive stadium fight. I think that's all it is. I don't know if it sort of ticks his legacy box, but I just want to see him over here, British running the heavyweight division, and it's selling out Wembley Stadium against anyone. That's all I want to see. Like you mentioned Lennox Lewis, and those fights were in America. I want to see a Brit have a massive fight over here, and I think him over here, again, maybe just ticking a box for me personally, but him over here against Dillian, Whyte, whoever, I just want to see it. That's all it is. Bring one of the Americans over here and let him really get that love. Like when it was AJ versus Usyk, it was almost like sort of Britain versus old Russia.
Yeah.
And I almost want to see that again, where an American comes over and it's us versus them. And I think that's when he'll get that real love, like he's doing it for Britain. Let's see. I don't think he's got that yet. Again, he probably doesn't care too much to an extent, but I just want to see it. And I think that's when the love will really come.
I also don't think you can underestimate. I agree that I don't think his legacy will be tarnished if he never fought it. But I don't think you can underestimate the power for the sport as a whole if he had a huge night. People still talk about AJ Klitschko, casual fans.
People still talk about Bruno and McCall.
Yeah.
And for everything he's done in the Wilder trilogy, and it has been amazing for the sport, and it's been amazing story for British boxing. It won't capture the imagination like a huge fight in the UK. Klitschko, Joshua. If you're measuring it up against the best wins of heavyweights of the last 15 years, it ranks where it ranks. But in terms of the impact it had on British boxing, probably it punches well above its weight.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
of the occasion. And that, maybe Fury doesn't care about that. And if he doesn't, well, can't blame him. It's his career, his money, his life. But I don't think you can underestimate if he sold out a big stadium and had a big night on primetime UK television against a good opponent, that would be monumental for British boxing as a whole. And we've had a fair few of those recently, but that would potentially top the lot.
Even him versus Usyk, if Usyk was to get past Joshua again, which I think we all probably think he will, that as some sort of British revenge mission.
That'd be a great fight.
Fury would love that as well. We spoke about that as well. Like Fury going, well, he beat AJ twice. I'll go in there. I'll do it for Britain. Watch this, AJ. Don't worry.
All the AJ fans.
He's going to train AJ for the rematch anyway, isn't he? Anyway, so he'll be all right.
Those AJ fans that kind of float in and out of boxing will get behind him as, you beat up our guy twice. Please, Fury, do the job on him. So that's what I want. And again, it will be liftoff for British boxing.
There's no way that fight wouldn't take place in Vegas, though. No. If all four belts are on the line, those two fighters are in there together undefeated, that goes straight to Vegas and makes a lot more money than it would in the UK.
Yeah.
You mentioned Joshua-Klitschko there. You know where I'm going with this. I put out a tweet and said, for me, for a lot of people, it was a brilliant fight last night. One of the best heavyweight title fights of recent memory. Better fight than Joshua-Klitschko for you guys?
Yeah, I think so. I spent almost the entirety of last night with my heart in my mouth. And there were moments of real drama in Joshua-Klitschko. But there are also several routine rounds, fighters taking rounds off to recovery, etc., which was the right thing to do. And by the end of the fight, it was an amazing fight. But last night had that much more jeopardy, that much more drama, a bit more unpredictability. I do think, and it was also a higher quality fight as well. For me, Wilder Fury 3.
Ade?
Yeah, I think AJ Klitschko, I think Adam Smith summed it up at the end when he said lift off, and it kind of felt like that, not just for AJ, but for British boxing at the time as well. But I think Wilder Fury, just at any time you thought anything could happen here. And that interests me a lot. Like you mentioned with the AJ Klitschko, at times it was like, okay, this is just almost a bit of a feeling out round here. Both of them are very tired. I think we only had a bit of that in a few seconds in the fifth round. Apart from that, you thought this is going to go at any time. And even when Wilder was on his feet, right at the end, you were still fearful, like, this could go wrong. It was a bit, and we might touch on it a bit later, but even when I was watching the Fowler Smith, it reminded me of that, like, Fowler could land one and Smith here. And I felt like that with Wilder all the time, like Wilder could crack Fury any time here. So because of that, it has to be sort of Wilder Fury just. And
I know, like, we spent the last kind of 18 months, 20 months or whatever, it's been kind of lambasting and writing off all of these cheating claims and like the real vitriol between the two camps. But, this is combat sports. We do like a bit of needle in boxing. Let's not pretend we don't. And obviously Joshua-Klitschko was very respectful to a great ambassadors of the sport. But it can't beat a bit of needle. When you consider everything that's kind of built up in the last 18 months, it really made that anticipation. I always say it, and every boxing fan will understand this. Even if you're not necessarily a boxing fan, you watch the fight. That 15 seconds, that 15 seconds where they come together and the referees go, right, seconds out, round one. Like, if you could bottle that, we wouldn't ever have to sleep, Ade.
That is Wilder more than any other heavyweight. Because he's so lethal. He is that dangerous that he just brings that extra element of jeopardy to any fight he's involved in.
What I couldn't believe late in the fight was we were seeing, it's the first time that we've ever seen, obviously Fury was hurt in the fourth round and he was hurt in other rounds, but when we were seeing kind of Wilder coming to the end of the fight, we actually saw Fury taking the shots clean and still coming forward. That was like bizarre to see, really, because he was landing flush, Wilder. He was only really landing maybe 1 or 2 clean shots per round at that point. But when he was landing, there was still fights that, got rid of Luis Ortiz after he lost 7 rounds. And the first fight when he was losing, the Fury number 1 in particular wasn't anywhere near as grueling as certainly number 2 or number 3, but he still carried his power late to the fight. He could still punch. And it was weird to see Fury kind of taking these right hands from Wilder and still on his toes and coming forward late in the fight. It was just...
What's more weird than that is I never, ever expected Tyson Fury to become this boxer. Like, it wasn't like he was a hotshot young pedigree and you're like, okay, they've got this 18-year-old that is going to dominate world boxing. He's that... I never... When did this happen? Yeah, like, when did he become this guy that was going to be the best boxer of this generation?
Well,
It's a remarkable
We
story.
had Barry
because-
in here. Like Barry was talking about. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go.
Well, we had Barry in here, and he was talking about the famous David Price Tyson Fury rivalry
Yes.
at the time, where
John
you know,
McDermott.
John McDermott beat him in the
right.
first fight, and like
It's incredible.
That was like I think possibly the thing Peter Fury did for Tyson Fury more than anyone else was taught him to box. And I don't think Fury needed teaching to box. I think he needed encouraging to box to use his skills, because I think he was so big, he was used to overpowering people and blasting them out, and he thought he could do that to anyone and everyone, which you saw, which is why he risked losing the first John McDermott fight. He went toe for toe for him when he didn't need to. It was when he became a more cultured fighter in the lead up to the Klitschko fight that he started to become the fighter we now know. But for me, it wasn't until the end of the first Wilder fight where I thought, wow, this is someone truly special.
Yeah.
Because he did a number on Klitschko in that first fight, but that was a very specific type of fight. I made him a huge underdog in that first fight of Wilder because I didn't see how after 3 years out, after abusing his body the way he did, he could be the same again, let alone after having the 2 warm-up fights he did, the first of which was pathetic.
it was like a clown.
And at the end of the first round,
Fury.
the end of the last round of that first fight, it was just, I remember thinking, he beats Wilder in a rematch. He beats Joshua. This is a truly great heavyweight, and I didn't think that until that point. And it just maybe that's Wilder's playing a rivalry was to bring out the best in Tyson Fury,
and they were
demonstrate how good a
brilliant
fighter he is.
foils for each other.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Inside
Personality-wise,
Yeah,
as
I was
well.
going to say inside the ring and outside the ring, you've got kind of obviously we kind of looked at him in the first fight as like the master boxer, awkward fighter against the puncher. The second fight we saw Fury adjust and adapt, and we saw Wilder adapt in the third fight. He was a lot more prepared for the Fury coming forward. He made some changes, but outside the ring, personality-wise, they're both two charismatic
Who
characters.
did Wilder fight again when Tyson Fury, when they done that first face-to-face in the ring?
Fury had just beaten Klitschko, didn't he? He went over to Vegas, I think, to watch him
yeah,
fight.
Wilder fighting. Was it Spilker?
Spilker, yeah.
Where he
Yes, yeah.
They're going to make a documentary from that point on
Yeah.
and close it with that knockout, and it's going to be It's going to be absolutely fascinating.
I saw somebody tweet something which made me laugh, and like obviously after the fight with the BT Sport, they captured them in the corner together. Tyson going over and Wilder saying no and stuff like that. Somebody said in a couple of years they'll have a podcast together.
Yeah. They're not that different either, I don't think.
No, and you could kind of see that, like, because I mean it was jovial really for the vast majority of the build up to the first 2 fights. Like, it was only really the trilogy bout and the ensuing time between the rematch and the trilogy where it got really nasty. But generally speaking, they always spoke about, being, getting on, and they were always on the same sofa together, cuddling and all of this stuff.
I think that's why Fury didn't
bit
seem
upset.
particularly happy after the final.
Yeah,
fight
he
last night.
is
Wilder who
upset.
changed, doesn't it? It was Wilder who changed over the course of those 3 fights in terms of the personality. Fury, his Fury. I think Wilder turned very dark after that second fight.
Yeah.
But then Wilder probably needed that to get
Yeah.
himself in the right headspace. for
You
that
just
sort of
hope
fight.
that he leaves it alone now, and like he can't. What we were talking
I don't
about
see how he
beforehand. Well, exactly. You would hope so, but you would have kind of said that about the second fight as well. But obviously, he still had the rematch clause, and there was still again something for him to hang on to. The towel come in.
Yeah.
The ref stopped the fight. My suit was too heavy. All of the laundry list of excuses that we got, but. Yeah, you would hope now that they can, just to kind of touch on what we spoke about earlier, that they can just put it to one side and just be happy with what they've... Obviously, Wilder's not going to be happy that he lost, but he played his role and played his part in a brilliant trilogy of boxing. It's something that people look back on for 20 years.
3 times, really. I know the first one was a draw, but he lost it. So I think he would be content and happy if he at least won one. I think to have lost 3 times is going to be difficult in a trilogy. I mean, you think of all the best trilogies, and at least someone's got one out of them, right? I think Wilder lost the first, lost the second.
He still feels like he won the first one, though, when he talks about it.
Well,
He
you
said
say
that.
says
that.
I
but
knocked him
think
out.
I think he's spun that since, because at the final bell that night, he was not celebrating like a fighter who believed he was about to get the decision.
No. This is, I suppose, more of a question, but when you're talking about how you didn't expect Fury to become this fighter, I even think just in this trilogy, the way he's developed as a fighter, would anyone have said before the first fight that he could do what he did last night?
Or in the second fight.
You just look at the performance. First fight, he's this twitchy, reaction, fast twitch fighter. Third fight, he's an absolute animal. I mean, maybe Wilder brought that out of him. But if he fought Usyk or if he fought Joshua, or
he would find a way.
Would he develop more? Is this even his ceiling?
The second
Right,
fight was a
that's a great
masterclass, but I wholeheartedly believe that if he used the same tactics he did for the first fight, he would have won the rematch anyway, just through being sharper, just through having the knowledge of what it's like to be in the ring with Wilder for 12 rounds, which
which says
That's
so much
impressive,
about
to
him
reinvent
to
yourself
even-
and
Yeah,
then
his
even more
versatility
effectively.
is unbelievable.
Yeah.
He has so many strings
He's
to his
got
bow.
everything.
Yeah.
And could he get even better?
He could. I mean, he hadn't
but there
boxed
is
in
no-
20
Bring
months.
down him.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the problem,
exactly.
yeah,
This
that's
is,
it.
this
There
is
is
kind of
no
the where I
one to
wanted to
bring
go
it out in him.
next. The question I wanted to go next was two-part question really. One, do we think anybody out there beats him? And two, if not, who do you think gives him the best fight?
I can't see anyone out there at the moment who beats him. He's too big, too clever.
Yeah.
Got too many ways to win against anyone. I don't know who gives him a tough fight. One fight I would be interested in is someone like Joe Joyce, because I mean that needs to happen soon if it is going to happen. And you think he's far too skillful, far too big, but Joe Joyce, I don't know, hits hard and will walk through 90% of any heavyweights. And I'm not saying I'd make Joyce it would necessarily. I think there's every chance that's very uncompetitive, but I think as in terms of intriguing fights, that is one that slightly intrigues me.
I mean, that description of Joyce is also something you could have once said about Derek Chisora, and look what Fury did to Chisora in their rematch. My guess is the Usyk fight is the most difficult one for him. I know people talked up the Joshua fight before he lost to Usyk, and I got why, because it would have been huge. But I always thought Fury won that comfortably, and actually a lot more comfortably than he'd ever beat Wilder, just because Joshua being that much more textbook. With someone like Fury's IQ, it means you can read that fighter a lot quicker. Fury needed most of that first fight to figure Wilder out. By the time he'd done that, he started to dominate. I think he figures Joshua out in the first few rounds and he eases to victory. Usyk could be a real challenge mentally, because Usyk can adjust. You saw how quickly Usyk adjusts throughout the Joshua fight. But the size works against it. Usyk, pound for pound, might be the best fighter in the heavyweight division, but I still think Fury's just got the size, and he's almost as good a boxer at least. So.
You were talking about Fury literally walking through Wilder right hands. Has Usyk got the power to keep him off?
No.
And also,
that's the issue.
one of the kind of the accusations, one of the criticisms of Anthony Joshua in his fight with Alexander Usyk is that he didn't make him feel the heavyweight size. We know Joshua doesn't necessarily fight like that. He's a mid-range fighter. He's not going to be somebody who leans over you and uses his size and weight. Tyson Fury will. He'll get hold of you. He'll forearms in the face, lean on you. We saw it last night. He did it brilliantly against Deontay Wilder. Tie him up, get the arm underneath the neck, lean on him, make him carry the weight.
Literally put him in a headlock about 5 or 6 times.
Make him carry the weight.
Yeah.
And you could see him doing that against Alexander Usyk. And Usyk knows as well. Usyk's been saying for many, many years that he wanted to fight Anthony Joshua because he had the WBO mandatory situation from moving up, and also it's a massive fight, and he had kind of the Olympic angle that he could sell it. But he's always said, and he's been on record numerous times, saying that Tyson Fury is the best heavyweight in the world. So Usyk knows that, and that is always kind of, I've always looked at Fury as just, I think it's way too simplistic to say, which some people have, is like he's a bigger version of Usyk. He's not. They are very different fighters, but he has the ability to kind of negate what Usyk does in a variety of ways. He can keep it long, he can kind of fiddle him about and not let him close the distance, or he can smother him and lean all over him. It's like you said, Dan, he's got so many different ways to win, and we've seen it against elite competition now.
And he's more than happy to be as ugly as he wants.
Yeah, he doesn't care, man. It's about getting the win at the end of the day.
But you know what? For the first few rounds, until Fury believes and indeed has Usyk's number, that would be an absolutely fascinating
it'd be a brilliant fight for us to
Usyk
watch.
could start out really impressively as well, and then the size and everything could be what tires him out, because he would have to work so hard to stay out of range, and then Fury might start putting in front. But while the first few rounds, before Fury starts to go on top, that would be a fascinating fight.
What Tyson Fury needs to do, I think, now, this is the perfect time, because we talk about the legacy and people are going to compare him to fighters of past generations. It's now time to kind of just stack the wins. So in 10 years' time, when we start looking back and we do say, is it Fury or Lennox Lewis? Is it Fury or whoever? You've actually got a body of work now. When you start taking on the Dillian Whytes and banking those, Joe Joyce, bank that, maybe
Joshua.
AJ again,
I think he's already got that body of work already to compete with some of the best. But there are only probably 2 fights that really enhance his legacy now, and that's Joshua and Usyk.
Yeah.
I don't think when he retires, if he beats Joe Joyce, good a fighter though Joe Joyce is, we're going to be saying, look, he even beat Joe Joyce.
No, you're right, but there is obviously, there's the Fury and there's the Klitschko. Sorry, there's the Wilder and the Klitschko in terms of real legit A-level names. Then there is that big gap to what some people might say are a C or D list. I think he can stack it with about 4 or 5 B list guys, and it just again makes the argument. in 15 years' time when we are all old men in a barbershop. Well, me not.
Speaking
Not
of
you.
barber, mate, yeah.
Yeah.
Shoe
it
shine
makes the
shop.
argument- well, I can take this. This is the barbershop worth beard, but it makes the argument better when we are comparing him to some of the greatest heavyweights of all time.
Yeah, I get that, but also you're saying to Fury, say, "Well, we'll fight Joe Joyce." Well, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
Well, you can fight, you know, the money that he made from the Wilder fights, the money that he would seek to make from the Joshua fight, obviously undisputed against Usyk. Against your Joe Joyce's, Dillian Whyte, I think, is a bigger fight over here. Somebody who's headline pay-per-views, and he would sell the fight. You know, them two going at it in the build-up would be massive. That would be great. But when you're asking him to fight like like a Dubois coming up in 3 or 4 years' time, or a Hrgovic or somebody like that, what's in it for Fury?
The problem is there's a lot of guys that we thought would have moved on by now that have kind of dropped off. Yoka was one 2016 Olympic gold medalist who hasn't, let's be honest, hasn't done much recently. F.A. Jagba last night, they would have hoped that he would have gone forward.
Poor
It was awful last night. So, I don't know. I don't think there's anyone sort of coming through the ranks that you think, oh, in 2 years' time, that could be the guy.
I don't think there's Joshua and Usyk are probably the only two who, if Fury retired, people would say, and this is the thing that happens with every
fighter, yeah.
You know,
Lennox
that's a
Lewis
fight
never
we
boxed Riddick Bowe.
Yeah, we never saw.
Yeah.
I feel like those are the only two.
Yeah.
If he retired tomorrow, you know, no one's going to say, "Oh, but we never saw the Dillian Whyte fight. Oh, we never saw the Joe Joyce fight."
I think probably Dillian Whyte would say that.
We're all significantly more confident that we will see him fight Usyk. Whereas if Joshua had won a couple of weeks ago and Fury won last night,
It'd be
we'd sitting
another-
there now saying,
yeah.
are we going to see the
The
fight?
carousel
Whereas
would
Usyk,
keep
you do
going,
kind of
but
think
Bloody
it's
hurt
done.
would have been a good carousel.
Yeah,
Just didn't live up to his side of the bar.
But I still think we'll get it at some point.
I do as well, but I think it's kind of a
still
fool's errand from me that thinking that we'll get it, because there's now, like we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, like Fury's commercial value in America, obviously his standing as the number one guy. Okay, Usyk has more belts, but Fury's the guy. Fury's the number one in the division. Joshua takes another loss. Fury, let's say, beats Dillian Whyte, or then goes and beats Usyk, and then they fight together. Then again, it's so
But I think
and people
Joshua
have all
wants it enough that it could
does
end
that
up
almost
happening.
make it more likely because
Yeah,
there isn't that like
Joshua will want that fight.
Oh, Joshua
But
won
then-
it.
but then-
Joshua won it.
Yeah, and I guess it depends really, because Anthony Joshua, you know, he's not short of a few quid. So if it's like, okay, well, you may not get 150 million now each from Saudi, but you might get 100, or you might get 80. And it's like, well, you know, all right,
I'll
okay.
put the silk sheet.
I think if you're Joshua, you think I've nothing to lose here and everything to win, really. Because if you lose it to Usyk again,
Oh, yes,
then
the massive
what's it
redemption
looking at?
fight.
It just
AJ.
becomes a
Massive.
so much less competitive fight.
You know what it
on the
is,
face
though?
of it, isn't it?
We
It's
say
so much
that,
less
but
competitive.
But I mean,
exactly the
look
feeling
at
we
how
had going
Mayweather
into that-
Pacquiao
the
sold.
Wilder Fury trilogy. That we all said exactly those things. Like, oh, Wilder Fury 3, what's the point?
And then before, we're like, what a Fury free,
Oh my
come
God,
on!
let's go, yes.
The best heavyweight fight of
Yeah,
the last
all
10
that.
years or
So
whatever.
You just don't know, do you? You really don't know.
No, and yeah, it would it would kind of, if they could get that over here, it would be like London 2012 again, Euro 96. It would just engulf the whole country. Everybody, you'd have like your Fury Dosser flags on the cards, and then you'd have your AJ Stay Humble ones on. Like, it would be
I'd bring out
brilliant.
Femi, try.
Yeah.
I'd bring out Femi.
It would be good, and it'd be massive. So, right, okay, we've only got a short spell of time left. So before we go, let's talk about the other card on last night from Liverpool, the main event. We're not going to get time to run through the rest of the card. So let's just talk about the main event, Liam Smith and Anthony Fowler. I think it kind of ended up playing out like a lot of people thought it would, Dick.
Yeah. Smith is the one of the two who's established himself as world class, and he ended up making it his fight. First round was difficult for him. I gave Fowler the third round as well because he landed quite a hurtful combination. And at the end of the third, you're thinking this fight's unfolding more at Fowler's sort of range than Smith's. But Smith, being the world-class fighter that he is, there are a few moments where I started to think you're looking shot-worn here, but he did gradually turn it into his sort of fight, and Fowler couldn't handle it. That first right hand, Fowler looked in a lot of trouble. But once he landed the second, you knew. So it was a left hand for the second, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You knew he wasn't getting back up again. That was a really impressive performance from Smith. Really revised his career.
I think the one crumb of comfort that Fowler can take is he carried his power to that level. I know he didn't win the fight, but he looked like a hurtful puncher against a guy who's, you know, been in with some big punches. And, you know, Smith will feel like, you know, there was obviously all the talk afterwards from Bellew about, oh, you know, McGuigan was wrong to put him in there. But, you know, Fowler's 30 years old.
Yeah.
He said he knows what he's doing. And I think that was a good yardstick for him if he builds on it. But if you look at both of their opponents over the last couple of years. I mean, it's night and day. You know, the guy who Fowler fought at fight camp versus
the guy on the roller skates.
Yeah,
Remember the guy he boxed?
Fowler's a good fighter, but every time he has tried to take that step up, he's found himself just a little bit short, which you might also say about Ted Cheeseman, by the way, who you might say is a good next opponent.
I agree, and that step up that he's taken is nowhere near the step up that it was last night either.
that was a leap. You know,
That was and he kind of said it in the ring. It surprised me. Anthony Fowler's post-fight interview surprised me a little bit.
I didn't like it.
What?
I didn't like the bit where he said, you know, I got the call. I knew it was a couple of levels to go up. I thought,
he said like, but you know, I wouldn't turn down a fight, and it's like, well,
he looked like he fancied it though. He
I
came
thought-
across
but
like he
beforehand it did, but he kind of
but then
after,
after, in hindsight, look, I spoke to Liam Smith in the lead up to it, and he's like, he understood the pressure of this fight. And it was a case of, look, you don't leave your house if you lose. And obviously those two have got background beef, which we're not going to get into, but a lot of pressure on Liam Smith going into that fight, none on Fowler, if I'm honest with you. So for him to kind of handle the pressure and put on that performance, and you're right, Fowler wobbled him in stages in that
couldn't
fight.
have really had a better first round. Obviously,
It was
scoring a
fantastic.
knockdown or chinning
Great
him, as
jab,
somebody
like
said to me.
really
Well, he could have knocked him out,
rammed
Rob.
jab.
Well,
His
yeah.
levers are so
totally
long.
justified Smith's, I thought, quite bold decision to change trainers as well. It really did, because he looked, that's as good as he's ever looked, really. And I thought Joe Gallagher was a really good match for him before, and I wasn't convinced that would work out, but based on last night, it was a sound move.
It was a really good performance from Liam Smith, particularly when you factor it really did show the value of that experience. And boxing, your Canelos, your Munguias, or okay, Liam Williams not necessarily on the same level as certainly a Canelo Alvarez, but you know, he's had those acid tests at a higher level than what he was in last night.
Urbanov away from home. So
Yeah, he's been
Getting the cut didn't bother him either.
no, because he's been cut before. He gets cut all the time. So, and I feel like we saw Liam Smith close even after the first round. We saw him edging forward, nice and compact, nice and relaxed. And Fowler was just had that nervous energy. He goes through these phases where he wants to punch his way out rather than having that experience of just buying himself a breather or offsetting his opponent. And that's where he got caught for the first knockdown, where Smith had just kind of stole his space and Fowler was trading with him and punching with him, instead of keeping the distance that gave him so much success, particularly in the first round. And before you knew it, he was down. It was a beautiful right hand. I think Paul Smith quite enjoyed that.
Mate, Jesus Christ.
But initially, I thought he was shouting encouragement at Liam Smith, and he
then I
realised,
realised
I don't think he was in shouting encouragement for
I think
anybody.
there was a few naughty words there from Paul Smith. But, I mean, look, the good thing about Fowler is that 154-pound division over here is stacked. So there's just so many fights you can come back and fight. You mentioned the Cheeseman one. I don't think
Bad knockout, that, by the way. I know we said we weren't going to talk about the undercard, but that wasn't good to see either, because Ted Cheeseman's he's
fire.
how is he only 26 years old? He's got one of them Frank Sanchez passports. Like he's like
yeah. Honestly, if there's any other country, you'd say he's cheating his age.
Well, the thing is, like, as well, like I watched the fight. I watched the fight last night at my dad's house, who's like a very much casual boxing fan, and like he ended up he's in his 60s, so he ended up going for a lie down at about 8 o'clock, and he said, call me when Cheeseman's on. I want to watch Cheeseman. Like, and for Ted Cheeseman, sort of British, like fringe European level fighter, like to have that acclaim and like that standing within somebody who's a real casual boxing fan, just speaks volumes to how much he's given the sport in such a short space of time. But that being said, like,
he needs a rest.
yeah,
that was always the danger.
yeah,
That was
because his back-to-back fights that he's had, so he's had like, not necessarily in order, but he's had like Fitzgerald, the Sergio Garcia fight was so punishing. That was such a terrible fight. Kieran Conway fight was a very close fight. Like Eggington was a fight of the year. JJ Metcalf, another fight of the year, and we kind of saw JJ Metcalf on the card last night, where it kind of looked like it had taken a little bit from him as well. It didn't really have the snap in his shot, so you would hope that Cheeseman now like just has a little bit.
He had Williamson out there though, middle rounds.
It was a really.
I thought Williamson's in trouble here, honestly, and then bang. Williamson's got that power though, hasn't he? Like, you thought that right hand at every time could cause problems.
and that much more fresher than
a
Cheeseman as
lot
well.
fresher.
But there was that moment in the middle of. I had Williamson ahead in the first 4 or 5 rounds of the fight, and then Cheeseman just had those couple of rounds where he was able to kind of just outwill him a little bit, walk through his shots a little bit, and you started to see Williamson tire a little bit. And you just think like, okay, well, the experience now is working on Cheeseman's behalf, is working in his favour. But then Troy Williamson found that second wind, and he was ruthless. Like as soon as he had him hurt, he landed that right uppercut with him against the ropes, and that left hook really spun Cheeseman out. Like
that slippery logo didn't help either, did it?
Shout out Betfred.
Shout out Betfred for the
Betfred scoring the 10-8 knockdown.
Yeah.
Great product placement. Say what you want about the slippery apron, but you know everyone was talking about it, so it's fine. Back to the main event, Liam Smith versus Anthony Fowler. Where do we want to see Liam Smith? The Jesse Vargas fight seems like what he's wanted for a long time. Does that interest you guys? You like to see that fight, Jesse Vargas, Liam Smith?
Yeah, I think he's proved himself the best at the weight domestically. So yeah, that. Otherwise, what are you still fighting for if you're not trying to re-establish yourself among the world's best to hopefully end up fighting for a title? Yeah, where's it going?
For him,
I thought he might have called out a world title. I thought he might have called out Castano and said, you know what, let's do it. It's a fight I don't think he can win, but I thought he might have said it. But maybe it's a Vargas then. It's that. And there's a lot of talk about Charlo vacating all these belts, right, and going up to 160. So everyone's now waiting for where those belts are going to land. So you never know.
That was, in most other weeks, had it not been for the Classic we watched last night, we would be raving about what a brilliant fight that was and what a brilliant card it was.
Yeah, it was an excellent.
And off the back, and there was a lot of interest going to that fight because of the rivalry. Typical brilliant domestic matchup, really. No,
Scousers,
really
but off the back of that, I imagine there will be a lot of viewers last night who will be really interested in Smith's next fight. And the zone having to expand and be as ambitious as they presently are, means it wouldn't surprise me if they put in some money to try and deliver him a world title fight. It would make sense.
I mean, his age and what he's done, a fight in Vegas, a big name like Jesse Vargas, I mean, that's perfect for him, isn't it? You could see how insulted he was to fight in some way.
Not sure it's a Vegas fight, by the way, but
no, but I mean, if you could get it on a card where there's like, if it's for a vacant title, then you could do like a, I don't know, Andre Quigley's not in Vegas, but a similar kind of like title defense, and you could build a card there, and you would like him to do that. But yeah, just going back to what you were saying there, I think you were about to say what we were all thinking in fight week. He did look a little bit miffed that people were kind of even considering Anthony Fowler as a potentially beating Liam Smith.
And there's a big gap, isn't there, between that level and world level, and perhaps that's just the way the cards are stacked in that division for him, and where he is in the standings and as a name and as a draw. Maybe it's not going to be easy. He's in a bit of purgatory, really, because he doesn't want to be hanging around having tear-ups with the domestic level. He's clearly proven he's better than that. But then, a title shot's going to be easy to come by. Probably not unless, Charlo vacates and suddenly there's this free-for-all.
I wonder if he can
have got previous, by the way. They brought Lomachenko to the UK. They brought Linares to the UK. Why don't they put a big fight on it?
Yeah, can he do that? Can he do the M&S Bank Arena against Vargas? I mean, will all those Scousers that turned up, what was it, 9,000, will they turn up for Vargas?
You'd have to stack the card, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you'd have to stack the card, and you'd want it to be for a world title.
I think it would sell, yeah.
Reckon?
Yeah, I do.
Particularly off the back of last night, it's a big performance.
After last night, capitalise on that now. Yeah. Right,
we said we weren't going to talk about the undercard, but seeing as we already have, let's talk about finally the WBA women's bantamweight title changing. Well, it actually changed. It wasn't changed hands. It was vacated on the scales, of course, by Shannon Courtney. Really resounding win for Jamie Mitchell. Ade, how did you see the fight? Because I was really surprised to hear Laura Woods, who I think does, by the way, a really good job on DAZN, but she said afterwards, opinions are split at ringside, and I was thinking,
no, they're not.
Are they? Like, was it
Yeah.
you? What?
Was your opinion, Laura? Because I think everyone else actually thought Jamie Mitchell won that by quite a few rounds. I think Shannon Courtney almost tried to double bluff us when David Diamante is reading out the scorecards, like, surely I've got this. And I'm like, you surely don't think you've won that fight. Like, you can't think you've won that fight. I know it's difficult when fighters are in there and you think, okay, I'm trading and I'm landing. And she did land a few times on Jamie Mitchell, but I thought Jamie Mitchell boxed fantastically well, especially for someone that's clearly a lot smaller. You can see how big Shannon Courtney kind of boxed up to come fight night. But I thought Shannon was disappointing from the first round when she started sitting on the ropes. And I was like, okay, she's sitting on the ropes because of the knee brace. Yeah. And she's scared to explode off the ropes. And then when she started to land, when she came forward, she caused Jamie Mitchell some problems, but then she went back to the ropes again. So I thought, is it a fitness issue, not making weight? But I don't know what Shannon does next, because I think Jamie Mitchell beats her again if they're going for the rematch. I spoke to Shannon. I was like, just fight Ebony Bridges again.
Yeah.
Just fight her again.
Rachel
It's a bloody
Hall.
If
fight
there's a
for her, just
rematch,
do
though,
that.
I do think you have to give Courtney
Yeah, she's
the
got-
benefit of doubt insofar as it's probably safe to assume that knee brace had a significant amount to do with her not making weight in the first place, and her attempts to make weight would not have put her in a good place mentally either. If she doesn't have an, hypothetically speaking, if she doesn't have an injury next time out, she might make
Yeah.
weight. She might be in a far better place mentally. Might fancy the fight a lot more.
And it's going to be difficult for her, though, isn't it? Because there's people. The threshold for criticism for her is significantly lower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a
Which
lot
isn't
of
her fault,
people.
by the way.
Well, no, not all of it.
Doesn't
Some of
help
it's her
herself.
fault.
I don't know,
She
man,
does,
like
she
the-
does say some things on social
The
media.
and the interview
Even the
last night, the
interview
post-fight
after-
interview
Yeah.
last
No,
night.
sure,
Exactly.
sure.
She's tried to craft this story about her kind of road to redemption through boxing, etc. And that now 2 defeats, it's getting more and more difficult. And then she doesn't help herself with some comments. That doesn't mean she's fair game for criticism
No, of
necessarily.
course not. It has
But
to be, yeah.
I think it's getting more and more difficult to get people to buy into her story if she's not
Yeah, for
winning
sure.
in the ring.
Sure.
Given she's already pretty easy pickings for critics because of something she's done, but also maybe
And there will be a lot of people that wouldn't have known Jamie Mitchell beforehand. So a lot of people would have said, "Oh, they're just picking out, a weak person to fight, blah blah blah." Although Jamie Mitchell obviously got a fantastic amateur record.
Yeah.
She's not like,
And you could
the
tell
other
that early in the
champion.
fight.
Yeah.
as
You
well.
see that early.
That's the contrast
immediately,
between
didn't you?
fighters more
Did you
than
see that
anything,
immediately,
actually,
right? Yeah, straight away. So I don't know. You're right. She's got to take the rematch. But there is Rachel Bull out there that will sell. There's Ebony Bridges that will definitely sell. And
Ellie
there's fun
Scottney.
fights. Ellie Scottney, yeah.
Used to be in the same gym, so I'm sure you can maybe sort of carve an angle out of
Yeah,
that.
and they'll say things like, "I used to beat you in sparring."
I don't think they ever sparred.
They
I don't
must
think
have.
they sparred many rounds at all. So I hear, but we'll see. Anyway, right, we've got 12 minutes before we have to be turfed out of here. A couple of weeks ago when we did the Joshua-Usyk reaction, I asked you all, not all of you because you two weren't here, but Ade, you, to try, if you can, and sum up last night with one word. And we're going for Fury Wilder here. So sum up Fury Wilder 3 in one word, Ade. Get thinking of your word.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Incredible.
Thrilling.
Conclusive.
Ooh,
I'm
I
going to
might
go for
swap.
majestic. There we go. Thank you very much for stopping by on episode 2 of the Boxing Social Sunday live reaction panel show. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and more so, we hope you enjoyed the fights last night. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
You know, I just realised I was looking at that thinking we've got 11 minutes left. What's he doing?